The Lotus Europa, a car that's as unique as it is iconic. It might not be as famous as some of its contemporaries, but it's a car with a story that deserves to be told. Let's start with a bit of context. Lotus as a company has always been about innovation. Their founder, Colin Chapman, had one guiding philosophy: simplify, then add lightness. That idea wasn't just a slogan, it was the backbone of everything they did. By the 1960s, Lotus was already a name to reckon with in motorsports, dominating Formula One and building some incredible road cars like the Elan. But Chapman wasn't content to rest on his laurels. He wanted to push the envelope, to create something revolutionary for the road. And that's where the Europa comes in. It debuted in 1966 and immediately turned heads, not just for how it looked, but for what it represented. The Europa was one of the first production cars to feature a mid-engine layout. At the time, that kind of engineering was mostly reserved for race cars, so bringing it to the street was a bold move. The idea was simple: put the engine in the middle, right behind the driver, to achieve perfect weight distribution and better handling. It worked. The Europa wasn't just another car, it was a statement. Now, about that design, the Europa's appearance is, well, divisive. Some people think it's beautiful, a sleek and futuristic shape that screams 1960s innovation. Others think it looks a bit odd, almost like a spaceship that landed a little too hard. But whether you love it or hate it, you can't deny it's distinctive. The low-slung profile and the fact that it's barely 42 inches tall give it a presence unlike anything else. Getting in and out isn't the most graceful experience. You practically have to fold yourself in half. But once you're inside, it's worth it. Underneath that distinctive fiberglass body, the Europa was all about keeping things light and efficient. The body was bonded to a steel backbone chassis, which kept the weight ridiculously low. In fact, the first models weighed just over 600 kilograms. That's less than some motorcycles. This focus on lightness made the Europa incredibly agile and fun to drive, even with relatively modest power under the hood. Speaking of power, the original Europa wasn't exactly a rocket ship. It was powered by a 1.5-liter Renault engine, producing about 80 horsepower. That might not sound like much by today's standards, but remember, this car didn't need a lot of power to feel fast. The lightweight construction and excellent handling made it an absolute joy to toss around. Later on, Lotus upped the ante with the Europa Twin Cam, which got a 1.6-liter Ford engine and, eventually, a high-performance special version that pumped out 126 horsepower. For a car that small and light, that was more than enough to make your pulse race. What made the Europa stand out wasn't just its speed, it was the driving experience. This is a car that strips away all the fluff and puts you directly in touch with the road. There's no power steering, no electronic aids, and no distractions. Just you, the steering wheel, and the sound of the engine right behind your head. It's raw, unfiltered driving at its best. The mid-engine layout gives the Europa a balance that's hard to match, making it feel planted and predictable, even when you're pushing it hard through the corners. Sure, the ride can be a little harsh, but that's all part of the package. If you're driving a Europa, you're not looking for comfort, you're looking for connection. Inside, the Europa is all about simplicity. The cockpit is snug, to say the least, with just enough room for two people. There's not much in the way of luxury, just the essentials. The dashboard is minimal, the seats are low, and the steering wheel is right in your face. It feels like a race car, because in many ways, it is. The visibility, though, is, let's call it, challenging. The side mirrors, which some people jokingly refer to as elephant ears, are more for decoration than actual use. But honestly, when you're driving a Europa, you're not too worried about what's behind you. You're focused on what's ahead. Over its production run, which lasted from 1966 to 1975, the Europa evolved. Early models, known as the Series 1 or S1, were a bit rough around the edges. They were light and fast, sure, but they had some quirks, like fixed side windows and interiors that made you feel like you were sitting in a Tupperware container. Lotus quickly addressed these issues with the Series 2, adding creature comforts like roll-down windows and adjustable seats. The later twin-cam and special models brought more power and refinement, making the Europa not just a great driver's car, but a more complete package. But here's the thing. The Europa was never about mass appeal. Lotus built around 9,300 of them in total, which is a drop in the bucket compared to other sports cars of the era. And that's part of what makes it so special. The Europa is a car for enthusiasts, for people who appreciate the engineering, the history, and the unique driving experience it offers. It's not a car that shouts, it's a car that whispers to the right people. Even today, the Europa has a devoted following. It's not as flashy as some other classics, but for those who know, it's a gem. Restoring and maintaining one can be a bit of a labor of love. Parts aren't always easy to find, and the build quality can be, let's say, interesting. But for the people who own them, it's worth every minute and every penny. There's something deeply rewarding about keeping a piece of automotive history alive, especially one as unique as the Europa. The Lotus Europa isn't just a car, it's a time capsule. It represents a moment in automotive history when engineers and designers were willing to take risks, to try new things, and to prioritize the driving experience above all else. It's not perfect, and it's not for everyone, but for those who get it, the Europa is nothing short of magic, and that's the beauty of it.